the last video in the Darth Vader Amigurumi series by Lucy Collins. I want to point out that about 35 minutes in, I make some changes creating the lightsabers, so you might want to stick around for that. Also, as we get further into the video, I ended up turning on my air conditioner because it's so hot here in Las Vegas. There's a background hum that I'll just apologize for ahead of time. Anyway, hope you enjoy it, and let's get started. All right, in today's video, we're going to start with our face mask. And to do that, we're just going to make a slip stitch in our yarn. We're not going to do a magic circle. There goes my dog. Sorry about that background noise. So once we have that on our hook, we're going to chain 2. So there's 1 and 2. And then round 1 says we go back into that first chain we just made, and we're going to work 2 single crochets and a double crochet in that. So there's 1, 2, and then a double crochet is yarn over, go through that loop, yarn over, come back, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through the next 2. It's about twice as high as that first single crochet that we did. We're going to repeat that 3 times. So that was 1, oops, I yarned over. So just another single crochet set. So there's 1 single crochet, 2, and then a double crochet. And then our third time we do that again. So a single crochet, a second single crochet, and a double crochet. And you can see that my loop keeps getting a little bit bigger, but I'm simply going to close that up when I get done. So I have round 1 completed, and we're simply going to go back and join with that first stitch. Just going to join with a slip stitch. A slip stitch, you simply go into the stitch, yarn over, and just pull through. So that has joined my stitches, and I just want to close that hole up a little bit more. We're ready for round 2. If you don't like starting your rounds with a slip stitch, you can certainly do the magic circle, and I'll link to that above. I have a quick tip video on a magic circle, but this time I just decided to start with a slip stitch rather than magic circle. Although you can see that that did leave a larger hole for me. I'm hoping that's going to be okay when I complete the mask. So now we have round 2, and we're going to, in the back loop only, we're going to single crochet stitch around to where we started. So we'll know that we started because of this tail that is hooked up to our paper clip. But this is back loop only and a single crochet in each stitch. So for a total of 9 when we get around there. And then we slip stitch into the next stitch. If I can grab it, we're doing the front loop only, but we're just slip stitching into that. And then it says to leave a length of yarn. So his mask was quick and simple. I'm going to go ahead and cut my length of yarn. I'm going to pull my needle through. And we use this length of yarn to attach our mask to our helmet. She says to sew the edge of the helmet to the head, make a couple of stitches on each side about halfway up, then do a couple of the stitches over the middle of the brow to define it. So I think this is a good time to look back at your book and see what that looks like in color. You can see it just kind of looks like an extended nose right there. So hopefully you've got your book in front of you. And I'm going to go ahead and stitch that onto my Darth Vader. It's just going to go right over the center of his face, between his eyes, as though it were his nose. And that's the other thing right now. You're not going to see that I have a rather large hole in the center because it's black on black, but it is going to stick up nicely. Again, you can use that magic circle video if you want, but I'm just going to go in and stitch that around on his face. And I want it to be very secure. So she says just take a couple of stitches, but I like things secure. So I'm going to just go ahead and stitch around. Again, the stitching's not going to show because it's black on black. What we want is a nice pronounced face mask. Once you're done stitching that in, you'll want to go ahead and take the tail that's attached to the paper clip and snip that off and stitch it in, as well as cutting off the end that we have here. We'll stitch that to the inside of our Darth Vader. In her instructions, she says to do a couple of stitches over the center of the brow. I'm not quite certain what she means about that, but I decided to take just a few stitches through the center where I had that hole, and that kind of builds out his mask a little bit. So if you can see the profile there, it kind of builds that out, and I kind of like the look of that. It looks more like a mask. So after finishing that, I'm simply going to take my thread to the inside, take a couple stitches along his face, pulling that tight through there, and then snip it off. And that should secure that nicely. And then I will go ahead and take the tail and stitch that through, and we'll come right back to the arms. All right, starting the arms, I'm going to go ahead and make that arm, the beginning of the arm with the magic circle, because I want the end of his arm to be closed up nicely. So make that first stitch in our magic circle, and then we're going to chain 2, and we're going to work 6 single crochets into our circle. I can go ahead and close that circle up nice and tight, and then we're just going to go ahead and continue and single crochet around the 6 that we just made. Remember, it's always difficult to get started on our first round after we've made a magic circle, but persevere, and it will get easier as we build out. Okay, we're right back to the beginning, able to close that up nice and tight because we did start with a magic circle. And then we're going to do two single crochets in the next stitch as we start round 3, and single crochet in the next one, and we're going to do that 3 times. We're going to end up with 9 stitches when we're done. So 2 single crochets in the first stitch and 1 single crochet in the next, and repeat. Coming right back to where we began. And if you struggle with coming back to the beginning, go ahead and put a piece of thread or a stitch marker in there so you know where the beginning is each time. And I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. When we do a magic circle, the tail of our circle is kind of in the center, so it's sometimes hard to get back to that starting place and knowing where that starting place was. So I like to mark it with a piece of thread. And then I know exactly where I'm coming back to each time, and I can clip that thread out when I'm done. For the next 8 rounds, we're simply going to single crochet in each stitch around, 9 stitches, so we're going to do that for 8 rounds. Because it's easy to lose track of your rounds, I mark each time I get a round, so I know I'm on track with how many rounds I need to make. In truth, you're just going to need to make both arms look alike. That's your goal. Okay, that is my 8th round. And then for round 12, we're going to start closing the hole down. So we're going to single crochet 2 together and then single crochet in the next until we get down to the beginning again. So single crocheting together, we slip through 1 stitch, come back, slip through 2nd stitch, and then do a wrap over and pull through, and then we single crochet and do that, repeat that process. So there's 1 and a single crochet. So you're going to go ahead and slip stitch that final, pull it through, and that this length of yarn is what we'll use to sew our arm to our body. And I'm going to go ahead and make the 2nd arm, stuff them both, and come back and show you how to sew these on. As you close up that 2nd arm, I went ahead and stuffed my 2nd arm a little bit quicker than my 1st arm. But just double check that your lengths are about the same, and take that last stitch and just go ahead and finish off, leaving a length of yarn. Go ahead and pull that stitch through. And then we're going to sew the arms to the body with that extra length of yarn that we kept. And then we're going to position our Darth Vader's arms and go ahead and sew those onto his body. If you have one side that didn't turn out quite as well as the other side, make sure you position the good side to the front. Go ahead and sew those in place. Again, in the description box, I have links to better needles, and I really should just order myself some, but some with bigger eyes would be a lot easier to thread. I think about it between filmings and then I forget. Then I come back to the table and think, darn, I should have ordered those. So if that's helpful to you, go ahead and use that link and get some ordered that have larger needle eyes. Because when you go to thread your yarn, it's a lot easier. All right, there we go. So I'm just going to go ahead and position my arm on my Darth Vader on one side, stitch that in, take my first stitch in there. And I like to stitch all the way around the arm, coming through the body each time, because if you're giving these to little kids, you want to make certain that that arm's not going to come off. Okay, I think I have my arm nice and secure. So I'm going to take a few stitches through his body to make certain that the tail of my yarn does not ever slide out. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to pull through to the front, pull it tight, and clip the end. Last week I showed you that sometimes you might have to grab pliers, or some other tool. Again, comment if you're using something besides pliers, or if you're having an easier time of it than me. I love to read your comments, and I'd also love to answer any questions that you have. All right, one arm is on, and after sewing this arm on in the same fashion, rather than clipping the tail of the yarn, I'm going to hang on to that so that I can use it to sew Darth Vader's cape onto his body, or his cloak, I guess she calls it a cloak. And again, just trying to position this arm at the same distance from his neck down, and then approximately equal space across his body from the other arm. I don't bother counting stitches, telling you where to place it, because your Darth Vader is going to look a little different than mine. most important thing is to just take enough stitches that that arm is not going to fall off or be pulled off by little fingers. Okay, I've taken my last stitch and I am just going to take a deeper stitch into his body, but I'm going to hang on to that tail and not clip it off. All right, it is time to make the Darth Vader cloak. Using the template on page 62 of your book, again, I always make copies. So cut out your template, lay it on your black felt, and then just go ahead and cut around that template. And we'll use that length of yarn to sew our cloak onto our Darth Vader. You can pin it if you want, but it's such a small piece, I'm just gonna cut it out. Actually, it's a little hard to do this on camera, so we're gonna cut a larger rectangle and then make it the shape of the cloak. Right, coming back with our Darth Vader and our attached yarn. This is a time where you're probably going to want more of a needle like I am using, rather than the yarn needles that I have links for. We're just going to place that cloak around him, and hopefully it's going to be as large as you want. Now, as you can see, my Darth Vader might be a little larger than hers. I don't really think that that's going to be as much of a cloak around his arms and things that I want. So I'm going to go back to the drawing board, grab my felt again, and I'm just going to cut that larger. I think the whole thing needs to be just a little bit larger. So keeping with my curve, go ahead and maybe make that an additional ½ inch on each side. And again, that's what I need on my Darth Vader. You may not need that, but I'm just going to go about a ½ inch larger. See how that works. Luckily, I have lots of black felt. Okay, for me, that's a much nicer cloak. I like that a lot better. And then I'm just going to take my yarn and I'm going to come in at his neck where I want to place that first stitch, and I'm going to stitch that cloak right through I'm going to take my needle and stitch right through Darth Vader's body as well as the cloak. And then moving around his neck, I'm just going to take some stitches. Each time I penetrate both his neck and the cloak. And again, you might have to go get pliers to pull this through. The eye of the needle, mine is not even really large, but it's still difficult to pull it through both the yarn and the cloak. Since I'll be speeding up some of these rounds, I think we're just going to go ahead and be able to finish our Darth Vader today. And that's exciting. Take that last stitch there through the cloak so that it's going to be nice and tight. And again, work with your felt. If you want yours larger or smaller than the diagram was, just adjust your pattern to fit your Darth Vader. Everything about crafting does not have to be perfect. It's fun, and it just needs to be fun for you. Don't get caught up in some of the details that are frustrating, or you won't want to craft ever again. So I don't strive for perfection. I just strive for it to be perfect for me. And I know I'll give this to my grandkids, and I know that they will not care if I missed a stitch here or there, or if it doesn't look exactly perfect. They're going to love it, and I know yours will as well. And then I'm just going to take a few more stitches and come out through his body so that I can tie off that end. And then clip it, and we're done. All right, so we have Darth's cloak. Get a nice side view there. And the next and last piece of this is his saber. She says to use 2 short lengths of cord, but she doesn't give any more instructions for that. So I'm going to grab a piece of pipe cleaner and come right back. So I do not have any dark gray yarn on hand. But again, my Darth Vader is unique, so I hope that I'm encouraging you to use something that you already have on hand as well. If not, go ahead and order some. But you need dark gray yarn, and you're going to chain 4. In order to do that, again, we're going to just make a slip stitch knot. And again, the interior of my lightsaber will be a 3-inch piece of pipe cleaner. So I'm going to go ahead and chain 4 with my blue, which is what I'm using for the handle. So chain 4 and skip the chain next to the hook and slip stitch in the 3rd one. So I'm not going to take the 1st one, but I'm going to slip stitch in the next 3. So there's 1 slip stitch going into the 2nd slip stitch, or the 2nd stitch. I'll slip stitch through that one, and then the 3rd. Slip stitch in that. And what I've done is just made a flat handle, basically. Then I'm going to chain 1. That's my turning chain. I'm just going to come right back, just flip my work over. I've chained 1, and I'm going to single crochet in the next 3. So there's 1, 2, and 3, and it takes me back to the beginning end. Okay, I've gotten to the end. I'm going to chain 1 to turn, and then just slip stitch in the back loop only. I went to the 2nd one and the 3rd one. That was much easier that time. Okay, after getting all the way back again, I'm simply going to cut a length of thread or yarn and pull that through to fasten off. Okay, now I have a nice flat handle. It's not very large. going to set that aside, and we're going to use the bright red yarn, and we're going to chain 9. So again, starting with a slip stitch in here. You can tie that to the end of your paper clip if you like. I'm going to start with a slip stitch, pull it tight against my hook, and chain 9. Skipping the chain that's next to the hook, we're going to go ahead and slip stitch all the way back for 8. Okay, and then chain 1 to turn. Then we go back, we're going to single crochet in the next 8. We turned that one, and we're going to single crochet 8 times. Oh goodness. Okay, all the way back around to the end. And then she wants us to chain 1 at the end and slip stitch all the way back down to the other side. So again, slip stitch back using the back loop only. She doesn't really say, or her directions are not clear as to where you would have used the cord. So I have another plan for making this lightsaber that hopefully is going to work. So at this point, I'm going to deviate from her plan, and using my 3-inch piece of pipe cleaner, I'm going to go ahead and put that right in here, right evenly spaced along my red. Is that like that? And then I'm just simply going to crochet around it. It's actually not going to end up being 3 inches long, but I'm just going to crochet around it. So I reached the end of my slip stitching, and I'm going to chain 1 because I want a little bit more length there. I'm going to lay my pipe cleaner in there like a hot dog, and then I'm just going to fold up the red around my pipe cleaner and grab the stitch on the other side and crochet those 2 pieces together. It's a little bit awkward, but I think it's going to work just fine. Basically, I'm simply sewing those together, but I'm doing it with a crochet stitch. So I'm going in on one side, I'm going through the exact opposite stitch across my pipe cleaner, pulling it through and doing a crochet stitch. If you have a better idea, go ahead and shout that out in the comments. But I think this is going to work well, and it's going to give the stability that we need for a lightsaber that can bend but not lose its shape. If you want to display it, that'll be great. It will hold its shape forever. If you've got little ones playing with it, it should be able to be bendable. We'll be cutting off the additional white length of the pipe cleaner. So basically that is stitched in, and your pipe cleaner is inside the red. Can you see how that worked? We just have a nice thick lightsaber. And then I'm going to go ahead and clip my yarn and pull that through to fasten off. And again, I don't feel like her instructions are very clear. So we're just going to kind of hit and miss here to get everything sewn on to our Darth Vader's hand. So remember, we still have this as the end of our lightsaber. I'm going to go ahead and leave one length of my pipe cleaner, take my blue and thread it into my needle and just stitch that closed rather than crocheting it. Thread the long end of my blue. And again, positioning it like a hot dog, I'm simply going to stitch it around the bottom of my lightsaber. I could have crocheted it, but I want to pick up the red as I go through here so that the blue, or in your case the gray if you have gray yarn, is attached to the red and also attached around the pipe cleaner. So we're just going to make some nice tight stitches in here, making certain that everything is nicely secured and covered. Okay, so we have a lot of loose ends. We have our lightsaber, which is bendable. I'm turning the fat part of the lightsaber to match the fat part of the handle. I'm going to come back in with the tail of my blue and just make certain that is securely attached. Again, if you prefer to follow her directions, that's great. If you can figure them out, that's even better. And if you'd like to share, go ahead and put those in the comments. But this just seems like a better way to do it. To me, you've got a nice bendable saber this way with all the colors that you want in it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and push this down a little bit and take my non-sewing scissors and cut that off. And then my red should just cover that up very nicely, just like that. So I have a nice saber. Then I'll take what's left of my blue, and I'm just going to go ahead and connect it to Darth Vader's hand. So just with sewing stitches again, going through his hand, through the saber, the gray, or in my case, the blue handle. Just stitching that nice and tight. And don't worry, we'll come back and clean up all of those loose red pieces in a minute. As you're making your red saber, if you choose to follow my instructions, and you find that it's not wide enough to crochet around your pipe cleaner, if you're using a pipe cleaner, go ahead and make an additional row, either by slip stitching or crocheting back, single crocheting back along the edge, just whatever it takes to get that wider. So it's wide enough that you can then eventually sew it or crochet it around your pipe cleaner. So if that's, hopefully that's clear, and you can make a comment on that if you like, or if you have questions, let me know. I've also had a lot of people send videos to me that maybe they had some questions and they videoed a piece, so I was able to help them with that. So another great option, you can send me a video if you're having questions at craftingwithnana@gmail.com, so that always works. All right, I have plenty of stitches in there. I'm going to go ahead and tie this off by coming back through my Darth Vader's arm and pulling tight, and then snipping it just like we have in the past. And now time to clean up all those loose ends. So this loose end, I don't need it to stitch anything down tighter. So I'm simply going to stitch it into his arm and clip it off. Super hard to pull through sometimes. Doing the same with the red. Again, I don't need the red to sew anything off with, so I'm simply stitching it back into the lightsaber and hiding the end pieces. So just take a couple of stitches in here, pull it through, and clip it off. The same with the long tail that we left. All right, taking my last piece of red, I'm just going to stitch it through to make certain that I have a nice tie off. Take a couple more stitches in there. And then we just want to take one last stitch and hide that tail. I love pipe cleaners because they're really easy to work with, and they end up being very bendable and moldable. So there we go. Darth Vader is complete. Okay, a nice completed Darth Vader with a moldable lightsaber. So I think that looks pretty cute. Thanks so much for watching and completing the Darth Vader Amigurumi by Lucy Collins. I also have completed a series on Yoda and Harry Potter, so be sure and check those out. Oh, and the Stormtrooper. So check those out. You'll find the playlists on my channel, and I hope to see you next time on Crafting with Nana. Bye.